Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Gotham. So in this episode, we picked up right where the last episode ended off with Bruce getting kidnapped, and obviously, I wasn't really expecting him to actually have the sit down that he ended up having with the lady from the organization. For now, I'll just refer to it as that rather than calling it by its name. I'll start calling by its name the moment this show gives them the name. Like I had the same problem with Preacher because I already knew ahead of time what the thing is out of Jesse was, so I was already called it by its name in the first episode, but I kind of toned it back. Like I've been mentioning its name multiple times. I'm sure like even in the episodes I did from last season, I'm sure I said its name plenty of time, but for now, I'll take a step back and just stop referring to that and just like, oh no, act so surprised and stuff when they actually name its name. But nonetheless, I'm going off book here. The point I want to get across is the fact is I'm surprised he had to sit down. And the fact of the matter is that the person sat down with him. I mean, her name is Catherine. We finally got her name. But the fact that she took off the mask and was like, oh yeah, this is what I look like. Which, I guess granted, in her case, he's kind of like, well, taking off her mask is her proof of being like, you're no threat to us. Like, I mean, she's actually impressed. The fact is that everything he came up with was a total bluff. I had a feeling it was. It's like I feel like if he had more concrete evidence, it wouldn't be as simple as like trying to have a meeting with him. It was a bluff, but they were curious to see what he had on him, probably see what he was capable of, and it probably impresses them. I mean, at least Captain Lady seems impressed, but they don't really see him as a threat. They never did. It's just like, oh, he's just an orphan boy that just has a lot of money. It's like, your name is on the building, but it doesn't make it yours. You know, it's like you're kind of only a Wayne in name, not power. So that type of situation. So it's kind of like you're no threat to us. I guess that was one reason. But at the same time, it's kind of like I'm letting you know what I look like because it's like, let that kind of sink in at any moment. I could kill you because it's like, they have already have it in their head that's like we could kill you at any moment, and even more so now that you know what it look like. But at the same time, it's also because she is only one face of this organization. I'm sure there's many other people, but even amongst the organization, she's the only one we've ever seen like really the more vocal person. I mean, even when Strange was talking to them, the only person he really, I mean, at least that we saw he interacted with was Catherine. So knowing that one person's face doesn't stop an organization, cut off the head of a serpent, like another one grow back in its place and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, I mean, we don't really know for sure that she's the head honcho of the organization. To me, my understanding was like, it's kind of equal partnership, but it's like, well, maybe she is the one that kind of leads everything. I mean, it also brings the question like how old is this organization? Is this organization as old as the founding families? Because that's always to me a very interesting storyline, like the founding families, like the whole Gallivan situation and Wayne's going back centuries, because that's something about like Gotham's past is something I'm not all that familiar. I'm familiar with its present, I mean not just in the show but just in the Batman universe. Like when Bruce is Batman, I know that Gotham, but I don't know the Gotham before he became Batman. I mean, with the exception of like his parents being murdered, that aspect of Gotham, sure, but it as a world, I mean as a city and as society. So it's kind of interesting to find out if they're just as old or they are just a more recent creation. Is it something like this organization passed down from generation to generation, or is it just a group that kind of came together more recently with the whole like Wayne Enterprise, specifically with Thomas and Martha? Like their arrival on the scene when it comes to Wayne Enterprise is when this organization stepped up. Maybe they were created around the same time Thomas was running Wayne Enterprises. I mean, maybe we'll get answers like that in the future. But basically, she threatened Bruce, basically like, okay, so you've been asking all these questions. You don't have any proof against us. Bruce is basically, I had my suspicions, obviously. There's a lot of stuff that's going down. I looked through some of Wayne Enterprises stuff, and I'm like, it can only be explained by a secret organization. And now you've proven my point. So she's basically, okay, so this is how it goes. You have to stop investigating us, the corruption in Wayne Enterprises, stuff at Indian Hill that's connected to Strange, as well as your parents' murder. If not, we will come after you and everyone you love. And Bruce decides, yes, he will do it. And he even talks to Alfred about it. And, Alfred's like, oh, well, are you sure about it? Because is that the same? Because, Bruce has always been told to let go of it before. But now it's like this organization poses an extreme threat because there's nothing known about him. Like, it's one thing going after the person that murdered your mom and want to stop corruption, but when there's like a full-blown organization that doesn't hesitate to kill people, like, especially as an organization that no one knows anything about, that no one knows exists, it's like hard to really battle something like that. When you're chasing out someone that killed your parents, it's like that's someone. There's a physical person, they exist. There's someone that you can take down. But an organization like this, yes, they're physical, but at the same time, it's almost like trying to fight a myth, a legend, or a rumor type of thing. Is like, how do you fight something that's no one thinks exists or knows exists? Something like almost something intangible is how I'm phrasing it. But then Alfred does bring up a good point. It's like, okay, you promised to keep your word and not do that, but what's to say they won't, break their promise? What's to say they won't, I mean, with an organization like this, like, it does make you wonder what is their ultimate goal. Like, we kind of got a little bit of it last season. It seems like, because Strange was kind of pushing more towards the kind of fountain of youth. That's what he was kind of trying to create. So it's like, I mean, that in itself kind of got me thinking about something. It's like, where is Freeze and whatnot? I mean, because so far the only person we've seen in Arkham is Nigma, but we haven't seen Firefly or Freeze. So, last time we saw them was like the end of last season when they kind of dueled off against each other. But nevertheless, the organization does seem like immortality might be. I mean, with any organization, what does any organization want? They want long-lasting power. They kind of coincide with Fish. What does Fish want? Power. That's what every villain wants, is power. I mean, other people kind of go about it different ways and want, they want power because they want power to get revenge or to take back something that was theirs or to take something they've always wanted. But ultimately, every person wants power for different reasons. Theirs seems like they want power in the form of immortality. It's like I said, that's what we kind of got last season, but hopefully we kind of get to learn more about, is that really what they want, or is that just like a stepping stone towards what their ultimate goal? But so, like I said, Catherine did show Bruce her face. He isn't really that familiar with her. Apparently, he has seen her in parties, but that's it. He even referenced the fact this, like, you've even been in our house a couple of times. Like, I know you. So, I don't know. That in itself kind of begs up the question of, like, in time of a situation where Bruce isn't really sure, like, who's to say some of the people he knows aren't part of this organization? Because this is someone he knew that's come into his house before, that's popped in and out of his life, been at parties and Wayne Enterprise related stuff. And it's like, she ended up being part of this organization. What's to say other people around you aren't? So it's like kind of puts Bruce in that situation of almost like who to trust and who not to trust. And he had the end of the episode where it was him crossing paths with the other Bruce, the experiment Bruce, which we're still not sure what he can do. Like, as we've seen with every other experiment, they have some kind of power sort. Like, you have Fish's ability to, manipulate you, kind of charm you with a touch. And you also saw that lightning experiment. Like, that experiment looked pretty cool, like shocking you at one moment and like snaps on his neck. That was pretty badass. But so far we haven't seen this other Bruce having power. And it's like I said, what is the reasoning for it? Last week I kind of threw out the theory that maybe Strange wanted to use this experiment as a way of kind of eventually replacing Bruce with this Bruce so that he has more control over Wayne Enterprises or something like that, or giving the organization more control. I don't know. Which is kind of like, well, at this point in time, Bruce, I know Wayne is his last name and it's okay to call him that, but it's like, at this point in time, it's weird just referring to him as Wayne. I just need to call him Bruce. It's like when he's older, it's just kind of like Wayne, because he's the only. Because, later on, people, when they say Wayne, they're only referring to him. At this point in time, it could easily be them talking about his dad, just because it hasn't been that long since his dad died. So, nevertheless, moving on. It's not like Bruce has that much control over everything anyway. Most of the head honchos there, that little, the board has most of the control of the company. He does have his own shares in it, so I guess it's like giving complete control to the organization. I don't know. I mean, it seems like at this point they don't really care, because I feel like because Bruce did attempt to sign over his portion of Wayne Enterprises to the organization as part of the deal, but they were like, "Oh, how are you going to sign over something that's not yours?" But basically, they're saying like, if something happened to me and I died, all my side of Wayne Enterprises gets transferred over to the government, the feds, and that basically they'll have access to Wayne Enterprises and is able to look at, kind of go through a more thorough search and might find some stuff about you guys, which Catherine wasn't too worried about it. Basically, like we're ready for such scrutiny if the time comes. We'd like to avoid it if we can, but if the time comes and we feel the need that we have to, hide ourselves, it's like we can do it. So I don't know. So that's kind of like what I was thinking. Like maybe that's what the boy is for. Like I don't know. Like I said, every experiment has the power. So I'm very curious as to know what his is, because that's yet to be shown. I wasn't actually expecting that to happen, and the whole like, oh, Bruce coming face to face. So it's going to be very interesting to see where that goes. Did not see that come, because I thought it was always going to be like, oh, when Bruce isn't around, the other Bruce shows up. That could easily come up, but the fact is that he knows that him and Alfred know this other Bruce existence. I'm very curious to see where that goes. Another story front we have is Ivy. Obviously, she wasn't dead. Very interestingly enough, because the dude from last episode who has the power to age things, because he didn't hold on to her long enough, because usually he'll grab hold of you and hold on to you, and the longer he holds on to you, the faster you age, and the longer you age, and basically you die of old age, as what happened to Miss Peabody last episode. But he didn't have hold of Ivy for long enough, so she ended up slipping out of his grip, and we see her kind of older. I would assume late teens, if not like early 20s, maybe. I kind of was originally thinking early 20s, mid 20s. I'm terrible at telling people's ages. I mean, that probably comes easier to somebody, but maybe she's not even that old. Maybe she is in her late teens. Well, let's say early 20s, maybe. It's going to be very interesting to see her go back to Gotham, and it's like, oh, hey, Selena. It's like, who are you? It's like, it's me, Ivy. What happened to you? That'd be kind of interesting. We do see a little bit of that darker side of her in this episode when that guy that helped her out threw away the plant. She's like, what are you doing? And he's like, don't worry, it's just a plant. And then she comes out in that very nice green dress. Nice. And it ended up killing him. It looked like she smashed the plant over his head. It looked like his head was bleeding. So it's like, okay, we stepped up that kind of bit of a stepping closer and closer to that villain side. Like I said, which is making me wonder, like, are they going to push for her to have her powers in this show? Because it's kind of interesting, because you wouldn't think, because it's very interesting to see, like, where people line up. Like, I would have thought, Selena and Ivy would be closer in age, but maybe, in this universe, they're making Ivy a little bit older, obviously, because she got older faster than Selena did. Or maybe what ends up happening to Ivy later on, the whole... Because I remember it was part of an accident, but I don't know, like, what exactly happened, the circumstances that made her into Poison Ivy. But maybe that ended up slowing down her body so it doesn't age as fast. So maybe she is older than them, and that's one way of explaining around that. But I just found it fascinating that she's older now, because I expected her to kind of grow up with Selena and Bruce, kind of be about the same age. But, because I threw out the thing last episode, I was like, oh, that she's with Fish Mooney and them. So I was like, oh, could this be leading towards her getting her powers? Maybe you get to see that side of her a little bit more, where it's kind of like, oh, she kind of learns beforehand to kind of seduce dudes, and then like when she gets her powers, that just amplified. It's kind of interesting, because she was always kind of a scientist first, and then the whole seducing men, well, people in general, didn't come about until after like her powers came to be. Like I said, Gotham is its own interpretation of the Batman universe. So I'm fine with it. It's just like I'm very curious to see like how they handle something like that, what they plan to do with her in the future. Like, if they decide to give her powers sooner than expected, I'm not going to be like pissed about it. I'm just curious of how they plan to line that up with everyone else. It's like, because something I've kind of always I've thought it's like, it'd be kind of interesting if we did get Bruce becoming, not that he'd become Batman this early in the series, because that's not going to be something until like late in the series, like kind of like Smallville. Like Clark didn't become Superman until like the last episode of the last season. But we could see Bruce building himself up to it slowly and surely, like seeing him go away and training and stuff like that. Maybe see him kind of being very vigilante like, kind of like Arrow, but he was kind of the vigilante, the hood, and then eventually got to where he is now, where he is the Green Arrow. So maybe we get a situation kind of like that, where Bruce is kind of going around being a bit of a vigilante, and then eventually that vigilante disappears and turns into Batman, who is still a vigilante, but like a more terrorizing vigilante. It could happen. I mean, because like, could you have Selena? Selena kind of has the skills she has now, when she gets older. So it's not like she has that much to go through. I mean, she just has to get a little more sneakier and kind of learn how to manage things on her own. Like I said, it's always like she's always following someone else's lead, and kind of, instead of taking the lead herself, she just kind of hasn't found her own 2 feet to stand on. She's always, like I said, always going with everyone else's plan. So. But also in this episode, we had Jim and Vicky working together again. Really like that relationship of just like, especially kind of that back and forth between them. Like, you screw me over, I screw you over. Just like Jim handcuffed her to Carl last episode. She locked him out and drove off on her own when Harvey and the GCPD went after Fish. Which was also nice, because I was about to skip over it. The fact is, we had Bruce, at least, not Bruce, God, Jim and Barbara's the first meeting this season, because he hasn't seen her since last season. I mean, to our knowledge, this is kind of his first time meeting up with her so far, like since like the 6 month skip. And it was a very interesting conversation. She's like, "Oh, what about Lee?" And he's like, "Oh, I thought you would be with Lee." And it's like, "Oh, we're not together." It's like, "Oh, you dumped her, huh, didn't you?" And then it was like, basically like, "Oh, you want information on Selena? Well, your price is a kiss." And Jim, I keep doing that. Jim didn't want to have anything to do with her, so he walked away. And she's like, "Oh, you're no fun." So, and then she talked about the fact that she had that weird dream. She's like, "You got in an accident, you lost both your legs, and I was wheeling you around in a baby carriage." And it's like, wait, what does that mean exactly? Like, I'm very curious to see what they do with Barbara. It does seem like on maybe some level she I don't know. Because that's always been a thing. Even after she got out of Arkham last season, like, the first thing she did was try to get back into Jim's life. She's like, "I'm sorry after everything that's happened between us, but I still care for you." And it's like, I don't know. Because to me, even with everything that's happened, she still cares for Jim in her own weird and crazy way. I mean, because it just seemed like more so than anything, she was delighted to hear. It's like, "Oh, Lee's no longer in the picture." I don't know whether that's because it's like, "Oh, now at least Jim opened for me," but I thought the whole thing was going on between her and Tabitha, Gallivan's sister. I mean, but still, I mean, I guess you never forget your past loves, especially with one that you were close to getting married to. Because I think out of anyone, she kind of feels like her and Jim are kind of similar, because they have a bit of a darkness inside of them. Like, there's something broken inside of her, at least there was, and maybe she feels like, seeing who Jim is kind of like, oh, maybe there's something like that inside of him too. Maybe that's why she finds herself so attracted to him. I don't know. Maybe it's just my imagination, but it seemed like maybe part of her is like happy that his heart's broken. It's like, "Oh yeah, you didn't get your happily ever after, but look at me, here I am. I'm having a success, and you're there just being a bounty hunter and just kind of all alone." So maybe that's a possibility too. But I was really interested by the fact is that they kind of like, I kind of wanted that, like Vicky and Jim, which, like I said, for continuity purposes, is kind of weird all over the place. Like I said, Valerie being Vicky Vale's mom. It has to be. And then you have Jim being Barbara Gordon's dad. It'd be kind of interesting to see that world cross. So it's like, so if they hooked up, does that mean we're going to get like a possible Vicky Gordon instead of Vale? Or is it going to be like, oh, Vicky and this universe is Barbara Gordon? Like I said, still don't know what they're going to do about that. But her and Vicky will be like half sisters or something like that. I mean, it's hard to say, because I mean, we saw them shack up together at, getting hot and heavy at the end of the episode. But we also saw Lee has returned to town. So that's going to be very interesting, because she's probably going to end up finding out, it's like, oh, Jim stopped by. Like, why didn't he say anything? Or maybe things didn't work out with her current significant other. Or maybe it will be one of those weird situations of, I don't know, like, maybe she tried to get it over Jim, but it just didn't work out, and she got thinking about Jim, so she decided to come back after all this time. Which is, interesting, like that she chose now to do it. I mean, I had a feeling it was going to happen because why? Because it's drama. You can't, love triangles are at the cornerstone of every good romantic drama with like a romantic situation, a drama. Just cut that back. Like, I don't know why I said romantic drama. A drama with romantic mix into it, because it's like there's always going to be a love triangle because it's just how things work. So the thing is, why now? Like, obviously, Jim checked on you like 6 months ago. You were happy, so he came back and just never went after you again. He just left you alone. He's never told anyone what he found when he went to track you down. Like I said last episode, he didn't even tell Harvey. So, but what I also liked is the fact is that Vicky is like, even she was like, because in her whole situation, it's like, okay, you went there, you sold fish out to Penguin, which I'm gonna get to that in a second. But you did all that work, because you made it seem like you were after fish for the bounty that was on her head, which was like $1 million. Yet you walked away with nothing, and the only thing you did was save your ex-partner Harvey. So it's kind of, she's like, I don't know who you are, Jim Gordon, because like to her, she's like, oh yeah, he was the original. He was a cop that was kind of a good guy, but he went through a lot of morally gray, okay, very, very heavy gray areas, obviously doing a lot of illegal stuff, but he was a good cop, but then he kind of fell off the wagon and now he's a bounty hunter. So in her mind, it's like, oh, the only thing he cares about now is the money. But you had an opportunity to capture fish and get the money, but you didn't take it. You focused on saving Harvey. So she's kind of like, I don't know who you are. And that's kind of like how I guess the audience is supposed to feel too, because it's like, we don't really 100% know Jim. Like, even with everything he's been through, there's still that part of Jim that is honorable, that will go out of his way to do what is right, to protect the people he cares about. Even though he may seem like he doesn't care about anything, he still cares. It's just, I guess, all of this is his way of trying to preoccupy his mind and his heart and pretend like he doesn't care when in actuality he does. So, I don't know. Like I said, that whole love triangle situation is going to be very interesting to see where it goes moving forward. Like I said, I mean, for for Valerie, it might not mean anything. It's like, oh yeah, it was a one-time thing. So I don't know. It did seem like, he's interested in her, she's interested in him. Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, because I don't want it to be type of situation where it's just like Lee, things didn't work out for Lee, so she decided to come back. I mean, did she kind of do in the past 6 months? She's did some soul searching and now she wants Jim back, or is it just, hey, I decided to come back to Gotham, check up on you because I found out, you came looking for me, but you didn't say anything type of situation. I don't know. There might be a lot more to it. We just have to wait to find out. And then finally, I brought it up earlier, the whole fish and Penguin situation. For one, Penguin is just astounding. Like, I really didn't take too much note of it last episode. The fact is that he's kind of becoming like a quote unquote pillar of the community. But it really stood out this episode because it's like he's literally rallying the city behind him, because it's like, you guys do realize you're rallying behind a criminal, a murderer. He's killed a lot of people. He's done a lot of bad things, but you're so quick to rally behind him. I guess it's because of the whole like, oh, he went to Arkham and he was fixed. He was cured of his madness, which is kind of like, well, let's not forget that Strange got arrested too, so it's kind of like, who's to say who's cured and who's not? It's kind of like I said, the same Barbara situation, because even Jim had said it. She was like, oh yeah, I got this whole note saying how I'm verified, not crazy anymore. And he's like, yeah, but let's not forget that was signed off by Strange. So, but nonetheless, it's kind of interesting that he's getting the whole city rallied up behind him. It's like, oh yeah, we got to take care of these monsters, these quote unquote freaks, the experiments, because it's like, oh, they need to be taken care of. They're destroying our town and the lives here. And it's so interesting that people don't realize how easily they're being swayed, because it's like, for him, he's bringing all these people together because he wants one thing: to kill fish. He's like making other people think it's like, oh, we're doing it for the sake of our city. But it's like, no, I'm simply doing it because I need justification. I need an army behind me when I go after fish and her monsters. Which, multiple things. One, I felt so bad about those two that got left behind. Like, they took out a few people when they were charging in, but then those people came and just beat them down hard with weapons and stuff. Like, they were bludgeoning him, and I was like, dude, that's brutal. I mean, that's what happens when people kind of join together, that mob mentality. But they beat these people down and then even burnt their bodies. That's like, that's, you kind of even see the look on Jim and Harvey's face, like, that's going too far. It's like, yeah, I get it, they're monsters or whatever, but at the same time, they are still people, you know? And that's why I don't even like using the term to describe them as monsters. They didn't ask to be who they are. That was all forced upon them by Strange. They didn't ask to be turned into what they are. But what I really wanted to point out was the fact is that the Fish and Penguin situation, like, Penguin was ready to kill her, but he brought up the question, like, you know, back at season 2's finale, you had your chance, you could have killed me. Why did you not kill me? And she was like, basically, I helped create you. I helped mold you into, you used to be my umbrella boy. You used to be basically my lackey. And to see that you have become, gone from Oswald Cobblepot to the Penguin, the man who was running Gotham City, and just kind of like, I'm proud of you in a sense. How could I destroy something I helped create that I'm so proud of? It's almost like a mother being proud of her child. And it almost, it was very interesting to I mean, part of you could be like, it seems like that could be her just BSing her way around that. But I mean, she didn't really have to. Like, the moment she got a chance, she could have just used her powers on him, but she did. So it does seem like there might be some truth to that. He did tell her not to come back. So I'm obviously going to see her, especially now that she has Strange. Because I did wonder, like, what they were going to do with Strange. Because it's like the whole Arkham Asylum aspect is kind of like, that's a pretty big part in the Batman universe. So what are they going to do with Strange? With the fact is that, I mean, like I said, I got to stop looking at it like, oh, what about other Batman material? It's like, you know, Gotham's kind of got its own continuity, just like, you know, take Smallville, for example. It had its own continuity. There's a lot of things that you can look at and you're like, oh, that kind of contradicts this and that. It's like, if this exists in the Smallville universe, why doesn't this, like, for example, why is Impulse around even though Barry Allen / The Flash doesn't exist? Because, you know, Impulse, Bart Allen, is his grandson, so it's like you need the Flash around for there to be Impulse. Like I said, its own continuity. So I know I'm just going off book, but, you know, you get the example I'm trying to make. So I was like wondering, like, if they lock him up or he died, it was just kind of like, you can't kill off someone like that, because it's just like he plays such an important role in everything. But it's like, what? I'm wondering how is everything going to work out for him, because it's like everyone knows you're kind of a mad scientist. Interestingly enough, you even had the feds lock him up, like Barnes had brought it up. The facility he was in was so that feds could debrief him and find out what he knows. Because it's like, find out what he learned when he was doing his experiments. And it's just kind of like interesting. Like, you know, you still, even though a madman is mad, you still have to take the opportunity to learn what he's learned, you know, what kind of breakthroughs he made. So I was just, that whole Penguin and Fish situation just caught me by surprise. You know, Strange did say that he can't fix Fish. How true that is, I mean, it seems like he was very adamant about the fact that he's like, no, I can't do it. So I don't know. I guess we'll find out next episode whether he can or not. Yeah, that's really all I wanted to talk about. Till the next time we meet, though, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.